Hi everybody, Jake here. Hope everyone's doing well today. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about some Cleveland Browns free agency stuff. Going into free agency here, some guys that I like, some acquisitions I think that would benefit the Browns. Let's go ahead and jump into this. Just to start this video off, let's talk about notable free agents for the Browns going into this free agency period. Free agents for the Browns: Jed Wills, Jameis Winston, Nick Chubb, Elijah Moore, Rodney McLeod. He retired, but then you have at the offensive line, Michael Dunn, Nick Harris, Jermaine Ifedi, and then safety DeAnthony Bell. So those are the guys that are going to be free agents here that the Browns could potentially lose. You also have questions about like Joel Bitonio. Is he going to retire? And then likely going to release guys like Juan Thornhill to address contract restructures. So the Browns are likely going to restructure Deshaun Watson. I think they already did that. Denzel Ward, Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Greg Newsome, along with Ethan Pocic here. The rough estimate for how much money the Browns are going to have to spend in this free agency period is $41.3 million. They have a huge dead cap number with Deshaun Watson, but through restructures, they save a bunch of money there, so they get about $41.4 million to spend in this free agency period. The positions that the Browns probably need to address most, not only in just free agency, but also in the draft. I'm only going to talk really about free agency in this because, say you don't address certain things in the draft, I'm just going to give the guys that I think you could go after in free agency, say you don't address those things. Offensively, quarterback, running back, left tackle, wide receiver, tight end, and guard. And then defensively, you need to address edge, defensive tackle, safety, and linebacker, whether that be in free agency or in the draft, doesn't matter, but you need to address the position. You need to get some guys there. Some guys for the Browns. Let's start offensive side of the ball that I think the Browns could go after, and it makes a lot of sense. Quarterback, the first one, feels like pretty obvious to everybody. It feels like the Browns are rallying, or Browns fans at least are rallying around getting this guy, or it just feels like inevitable. Kirk Cousins is the first guy. Familiarity with Kevin Stefanski. West Coast guy, West Coast scheme. Not a West Coast guy, but he's playing the West Coast scheme with Kevin Stefanski. It makes a lot of sense to bring in a guy like Kirk Cousins. You can probably get him on a favorable contract because he's likely going to get cut by Atlanta, and you probably won't have to pay him a whole lot of money to bring him in here. He is stable, good character guy. It makes a lot of sense to bring in a guy like Kirk Cousins. I think the Browns can find success with Kirk Cousins. We've seen that Kevin Stefanski has really been able to make any quarterback work outside of Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. So Kirk Cousins, I think, makes a lot of sense for the Browns. If you didn't want to go the Kirk Cousins route, a guy that I've loved for years now, I feel like he hasn't had a fair shake in the NFL, teams like Chicago and Pittsburgh, Justin Fields. Justin Fields is kind of controversial, I feel like, amongst the NFL. I just don't believe that Justin Fields has had a fair shake in the NFL. Yeah, rah-rah, this is my Ohio State bias, but you bring in a guy like Justin Fields, the city would love him. I think he gets under Kevin Stefanski. I think Kevin Stefanski can come up with a scheme that works for him. Try him and Kevin Stefanski's scheme with this heavy zone run attack. But Justin Fields, I think, would be a lot of fun in Cleveland. I think it would make sense in Cleveland. I think you get him for relatively cheap. Same thing with Kirk Cousins here. But I think those two at quarterback make a lot of sense for the Browns. Running back, this is a position where you just need to bring back Nick Chubb on a largely incentive-based deal, and you need to go draft somebody. I don't want to just go so hard, you got to draft somebody, but this is a position. It makes total sense to draft somebody in a draft class as deep as this 2025 draft class is. You can get a guy to fit in there, whether it be Nick Singleton, Jordan James, Dylan Sampson, Caleb Johnson, go down the list. You can get easily 2 running backs in this draft, and you can implement them in here. Bring Nick Chubb back on an incentive-based deal. Have 3-4 running back room here. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm not going to waste too much time on running back because I don't think it makes a lot of sense for the Browns to go spend big money on a free agent running back that you can find a younger and cheaper guy in the draft. So wide receiver. So wide receiver is interesting to me for the Browns. They are Elijah Moore being a free agent. I think it makes a lot of sense to bring him back. And then if you want to go star power, big deal, throw a lot of money at a guy, I think it makes a lot of sense for the Browns to make a run at T. Higgins Now, the Browns don't have a whole lot of money. It, I shouldn't say they don't have a whole lot of money. It just feels like the Browns dumping a lot of money into these superstars or long-term contracts doesn't make a lot of sense. But T. Higgins is a talent that could work in Cleveland. He's a big body guy. You're also taking from Cincinnati, which is always beneficial to you. You make your adversary a little weaker. If you could throw money at T. Higgins, he's probably going to run you like $21 million, $22 million annually. If you can make a run at T. Higgins, I think that'd be really cool for the Browns. I only have questions though. Do you want to throw a bunch of money at a wide receiver when you have so many other issues in cap space? Doesn't feel easy to come by, even though the Browns are in a relatively decent spot considering the circumstances with Deshaun Watson and everything that goes with that. They have a lot of older contracts. They have a lot of restructures going on. But if you can get T. Higgins for that number, $22 million, that'd be, yeah, you're giving the guy that you bring in here, Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields, whoever it is, or if you draft a guy, you're giving him some firepower to work with. So T. Higgins would be my number one. That'd be in a perfect world if everything was great. T. Higgins, but if you can't get a guy like that, I'd probably just bring back Elijah Moore. Familiarity here, and he's only 24 years old. He might be 25 going into next season, but even Elijah Moore, you can get him on a relatively cheap deal. You can bring back the Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Elijah Moore wide receiving core moving forward, and then you also have younger guys on the roster that you can go forward with too. As far as tackle and guard go, I don't feel great about any of the tackles or guards in this free agency class. Again, this is where I think you need to draft a guy, but excuse me, probably bring back Jedrick Wills here. He suffered that injury, and we've had this back and forth with Jedrick Wills since he's been in Cleveland of the effort. You spend a top 10 pick on this guy, and it doesn't feel like he's lived up to the name. He's good enough. He gets by. If you want to throw him back at left tackle, you can go for that. If you didn't want to and you wanted to continue with DeJuan Jones, makes a lot of sense too. If it were me, probably try to bring back Jedrick Wills on a cheaper deal. I think you can get him for cheaper. He had a season-ending injury. Makes a lot of sense to bring Jedrick Wills back. Now, say the injury didn't happen, I'm not paying Jedrick Wills crazy money. So for Jedrick Wills, it all depends on what that contract looks like. If you can get him on a team-friendly deal, I would absolutely bring back Jedrick Wills. And then if you wanted to bring back like a guy like Jermaine Ifedi, he got cooked most of the year, but familiarity there, and he can at least just fill a hole, be a Band-Aid in a pinch. So if you want to bring back like a guy like Jermaine Ifedi, I'm cool with that, but I think the Browns also need to address this in the draft here. Let's jump to the defensive side of the ball. Defensive side of the ball, edge rusher. Two edges that I like for the Browns. Oh, God. I'm going to say this, and I just realized my Ohio State bias. I'm just bad with Ohio State. I just love Ohio State too much. But if you wanted to bring in like a reacclimation project, say you don't draft a guy like Abdul Carter, you could bring in a guy like Chase Young, run you like $8 million. You can bring him in on a one-year deal and just see what you have. I hate to kind of say this at the same time because it feels like in one of my earlier videos I talked about this. It feels like we've just put a patchwork defensive end over there. It did work with Zadarius Smith for a little while, but like guys like Jadeveon Clowney, it feels like you're kind of doing that again with Chase Young. But bring him back to Ohio, bring him back to where the state he went to college in. You could get him for like $8 million, put him on a one-year deal. Do something like that. You can give it a try with Chase Young and just see what you have with him. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I like Chase Young a lot for the Browns. He had 7 sacks last year. Pair him with Myles Garrett. Anybody's going to look better whenever they're paired with Myles Garrett. So Chase Young is the guy I have here. As far as defensive tackles, B.J. Hill is a guy that I've always liked, Cincinnati defensive tackle. We were in the running to get him last year, if I'm remembering correctly. He's going to be a little bit more expensive at D-tackle. He's going to run you $10 million, had a decent year for Cincy. B.J. Hill's a guy I like, run stuff guy. He's just a good player. Losing guys like Mo Hurst to free agency, you could bring in a guy like B.J. Hill. And if the Browns spent some money at this position, I definitely wouldn't be mad at him for it. And then to follow up with that, if you just wanted to bring back a guy like Mo Hurst, you could get him on like $1.52 million deal, probably. Wouldn't be mad about that. This defensive line has shown that it has worked well under Jim Schwartz's system. Not this year, but the year prior. I think a lot of this season was just lost due to the Deshaun Watson situation and due to it feeling completely lost after that all happened. You get in a whole. I think this Browns defense is better than it gets credited for. If the Browns wanted to bring back some of these guys, I think it would make a lot of sense. So Mo Hurst is my other guy in this spot here. BJ Hill, Mo Hurst. One of those two. Wouldn't be mad at you for it. To address linebacker, linebacker is a position I don't think the Browns need to mess around with. I don't think the Browns have time to mess around with this position. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah having a potential career-ending injury with the neck injury, and I don't want to blow this out of proportion, but this is just, we have not heard great updates on the JOK situation. They're hopeful to get him back, but you need to address this position. If you don't, he's your superstar, and if you can't get that guy back, you need to address this quickly. A guy that I really like for the Browns in this spot is Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner played well for Washington this year, and they're having a good run in the playoffs this year. If you could bring in a guy like Bobby Wagner for like $6.5 million, that's at least what his annual value is looking at. Definitely would not be mad about that. I just think the Browns need to not mess around in a position like this. I would maybe consider signing veterans in this spot just to fill what the need immediately. I also wouldn't be mad if the Browns drafted a guy in this situation, but Bobby Wagner, you can bring in a veteran here, guys like that. The next guy at linebacker, I'm talking on both sides of my mouth here, but you could bring in a guy like Isaiah Simmons. He was drafted in the same draft class as Jedrick Wills. I know I just said that you want to bring in like veterans in this case, but Isaiah Simmons played for the Giants last year, didn't have a great year. He was drafted by Arizona. They didn't offer him an extension. Goes to New York, doesn't have a great year. He brought in a guy like Devin Bush last year, which was like another reacclimation project that didn't seem to work out. If you wanted to try that with Isaiah Simmons, I think it'd definitely be a good thing. Isaiah Simmons has had the same criticism since he's came into the league, with too big to be a safety, too small to be a linebacker. I think Isaiah Simmons was drafted 8th for a reason. If you wanted to try to bring him back, bring in a reacclimation project like this, I think it would be cool for the Browns. Pass coverage stuff, run stuff, I don't know. Isaiah Simmons is a name that I like for the Browns. If they wanted to try him, I think it'd make a lot of sense. As far as safety goes, this is a position where the Browns, I think, two guys specifically I love for the Browns in this spot is Andre Cisco and Trayvon Moehrig. These guys could both get extensions with their current teams right now. Andre Cisco, I love. He is great in pass coverage. With Grant Delpit over there, if you wanted to bring in more of a pass coverage guy, Andre Cisco fills that gap. He's great in pass coverage. He is kind of a center fielder. He can get a lot of interceptions. So I think he had 4 last year. So a guy like Andre Cisco, if you could bring him in for like a $2 million deal, something like that, makes a lot of sense for the Browns. If you can get him on a cheap deal long term, I like Andre Cisco. He's young. And then same thing with like Trayvon Moehrig. He plays for the Raiders right now. Younger guy, you can get him on a cheap deal. Like, makes a lot of sense for the Browns. So safety is where I think the Browns can run away with it in free agency. If there was a position I was most excited about for the Browns in free agency, it would definitely be safety. But again, if the Browns just wanted to draft somebody, I'd get that too. So that's my early look into this free agency for the Browns right now. Now, this is a super, super early video because we still have all of the draft to go through and see what the Browns do, what positions they address in the draft, and then after the draft, it'll become clear what free agents the Browns can pursue after the fact. But these are just some guys that, looking at it early, say the Browns don't address anything in the draft. These are guys that, if the Browns put in these positions, I think it would be beneficial to the Browns here. So go ahead, let me know what you guys think. Let me know some free agents that you'd be excited about if the Browns brought in. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. Go Brownies, baby.